Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. It is a couple of minutes after 3, and I want to be conscientious of everybody's time today. Before we get started, just want a quick reminder that today's presentation is being recorded. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat, and our presenters will be happy to answer those for you either during or after the presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Murphy, who I think is going to introduce today's speakers.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Chris Murphy. I'm one of the CEOs and co-founders of Sports for Learning. And thanks very much for taking time out of your busy agendas. I know that everybody is pretty swamped at the moment, but great to have you. Just, before we get going, we are a new sort of associate member working with SSDA. And so far it's been a great experience. So, much thanks to Corey. She's really on the ball and has kindly set this up. Before I introduce Chris and Ashley, I thought I'd just give you like a quick 2-minute history as to how we're here. So again, our company is called Sports for Learning. And before COVID hit, essentially what we used to do was we would bring out local college students who come out to your school sites, and we would operate during lunch recess or during PLC release time. And schools and districts would typically take us on to help with attendance, to help with chronic absenteeism, to help with suspensions or referrals. So obviously then COVID hit in March, and we freaked out for a little bit, to be honest with you. At the time, we were partnering with 300 schools and over 50 districts. And after our short little freak out, what we decided to do to fulfill those contracts was to provide videos. And we soon figured out that is what you call asynchronous learning. And we're no Hollywood producers, but what we got pretty good at was delivering sort of PE with at-home adaptations that literally any kid could do at home. They don't need a soccer ball, they don't need a basketball. So now we have 3 models. We still do the asynchronous. We do synchronous, whereby we deliver sort of Zoom lessons or virtual lessons, typically during that enrichment period of the day. And then lastly, we train PE teachers and teachers on how to deliver PE with at-home adaptations, and then most importantly, on how to blend SEL into PE, which is essentially the topic for today. So I'm going to pass it over to Chris. Chris will go for maybe 20, 25 minutes. Then Ashley, who is our COO, will go for sort of 15 minutes. And then we'll do questions at the end. As Corey said, if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat box, and I'll try to keep an eye on them. But I'll pass it over to Chris. In essence, Chris has been on our board of advisors for us for this year, has really helped us shape our curriculum. He's a principal consultant for his own consultancy firm called Corliss Associates, and has essentially been working with K-12, for 35 years now, at both a district and a county office level as a program coordinator. So I'll pass it over to Chris, and again, thank you for joining, and really hope that you get something out of today.
Thank you, Chris. Really great to be here today. I wanted to, first of all, thank Corey for the opportunity and Chris to talk to you today a little bit about social emotional learning and really how that can be leveraged in physical education, physical activity. And what are some of the current issues that are facing public schools. I'm going to share my screen here. I think everybody should be able to see that so that you can get a better idea of how hang on one second here, let me go back. Okay. Thinking about social emotional learning in physical activity and physical education, we are in the return to school environment now. As many of you know, or many of you are experiencing, you've got kids coming back, either coming back to school at some grade levels, you've got your kids all online, or you're anticipating that happening. So today what I'm hoping to do is talk to you a little bit about what my experience has been I worked for a large county office of education in Orange County for the last 18 years. Prior to that, I was a director of programming and educational services in a couple of other school districts in Southern California. So I've got about 35 years of experience, both teaching and program direction, program leadership, administrative leadership in public schools. And I'm excited that we have this opportunity because I think this is a great way to help alleviate some of the anxiety and uncertainty that students are feeling and that teachers aren't feeling. And I've enjoyed working with Chris and the Sports for Learning folks over the last year, watching them grow and adapt their program to what the needs of the community are. So, you know, in general, probably many of you, you know, if a year ago, we were all so excited about school starting. And I know across California, I've also done some work in the past year and a half on the new California Health Education Framework Project, and been across the state of California and listened to school district leaders and teacher leaders talk about how social emotional learning was such a critical component of what they were doing and how they were thinking about both instruction, curriculum design, and student learning and assessment. So a year ago, we were all so excited about social emotional learning. So I thought I'd just remind us all why we were so excited about social emotional learning and just to make sure we all remember why this might be so important for us again now.
So got turned into the district office.
Sorry.
Just want to make sure you got it in.
What do you really want for your children? You want them to be
Couple of technical issues.
Our children are begging us for the right to believe in themselves and the right to be inspired. The children are crying out and saying, I don't see purpose in my life. I don't have a dream anymore.
You make achievements, but you never get to the top.
It's like, okay, I'm gonna go to school, but what's the value if I'm not even going to be able to relate to anyone?
SEL is trying to bring a balance to the individual and what are the personal competencies you need to develop to be successful. How together kids can relate and navigate the world more effectively.
There's a great demand, and it's a growing demand. I think it comes from all kinds of sectors. It comes from the business world, who believes that the biggest skill problem we have is not technical skills, it's the ability to work together with others.
They want them to be collaborative, communicative, creative, be able to work in a group setting. And so for us, it's a huge part of that student's education.
We want for kids to embrace one another, to accept people for who they are, to know how to relate to one another, to know how to understand themselves.
It helps me have a happier brain and be more efficient.
Definitely straightened out my life. I can't even like pick where to begin. It just teaches you how just to be empathetic towards others and how to listen and I don't know, how to care.
All right.
It's really about developing those attitudes, skills, and knowledge that allows a student and an adult to achieve that, that approach to how they will work as a person.
We have the evidence, we know it works. We have the compelling argument that we need the whole child. I think it is our time to really capitalize on it.
We actually do have evidence now. We did not have it 15 years ago. I mean, to be fair, we were in the R&D phase in the field of social and emotional learning. We're not in that phase anymore. Content is more and more of a commodity. Children own what they want now at very young ages. They will become self-directed. They can find out the dates of the Civil War without learning it from a teacher. So the question that they're bringing to school is, who am I? How do I work with you? How do we build a team? What is our purpose? Where do I fit? That nurture children to believe that it's worth learning.
So those are the challenges that we're faced with today in our public education. Let's quickly go down and look at the core competencies of CASEL, which is the Collaborative for Social Emotional Learning. And think about those as we look at those more closely: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, responsible decision-making. In that little video, we were so excited about all of the effort that had been made over the last 10 years, specifically over the last 3 or 4 years, where we saw many new aspects of social emotional learning being developed and implemented in curriculum and instruction, especially in professional learning opportunities for teachers and teacher leaders, principals, and school administrators. So as we think about those social emotional competencies and the skills that make up those competencies, and we relate that to where we are today in this climate of uncertainty as we return to school, as we reopen and re-enter school, have these ever been more important than they are right now? To be aware of our feelings and to be able to identify them, to manage the stressors of day-to-day life and the unknown and the uncertainty that we're faced with every day, to be aware of and have the skills to calm our anxieties, our fears, to deal with that, again, that sense of uncertainty. Can we experience, and do we experience, relational empathy? Somebody understanding how the pandemic is influencing us, influencing our feelings, our concerns, our desires, our hopes, our dreams. How it's impacting our personal life and our work life, our colleagues, the teachers and the staff that we have in our schools. And then thinking about, you know, most importantly, our students and their families, and how often in the most inequitable ways they're able to get empathy and to be able to access the resources and tools that they need in order to learn and to stay engaged in this new unknown environment that we have. You all, if you're school administrators, and I'm assuming many of you are school and district administrators who are participating in the Small Schools Districts Association, are those who are making decisions that can affect thousands of families and lives every day. How important are these social emotional competencies and skills for you today and for the people that you work with? So we know that social emotional skills build that self-esteem, self-image, self-reliance, self-confidence that we all want. We want in our staff, we want in our teams, we want in our principals, we want in our teachers, our teacher leaders, and in our students. And we know that if we get this, we're going to see this continued improved relationship with families and schools and communities. And now more than ever, isn't that super important to all of us? Let's think for a second about what that uncertainty means for on the ground. You know, it requires us now to think about first, what's a safe, supportive teaching and learning environment look like? And based on the support that we're getting from our local public health department, our own district, our families, our teacher leaders, you know, reopening is certainly going to be a challenge and continue to be a challenge, not just in the next month, but over the next year as we adapt to the new environment. And I think that that whole idea of adaptability is super important to remember. Social emotional learning allows us to become more adaptable. So I guess the challenge for us and for you as teacher leaders is how do we help teachers make the shifts that are necessary for us to be able to establish safe, supportive teaching environments? How to make environments safe for adults, that's the teachers, instructors, parents, and caregivers on campuses and in and around campuses, and those learning environments for students. But whether it's online, in person, or some kind of hybrid or blended approach, what can we do that will help reduce anxiety, and the stress that affects all of them. So this work is a high priority. It's been exciting for me to be able to support some of the commercial vendors that are out there and folks who are doing professional learning, both from the state level and state and national organizations that are involved in health education, and physical activity, because we know that these are tools and activities that can support the kind of social emotional learning, as well as leverage that instructional time given to social emotional learning to enable kids to acquire new skills while they're also thinking about the social emotional learning and the needs that they have in that area. So while everyone has faced disruption, and as we all are going to be acknowledging the complex and the various ways that we have all experienced this past 6 months, you know, we have to, I think, come to understand and to accept that we've all been traumatized to some extent. So in this reopening process, social emotional learning can provide that opportunity, you know, to elevate student voice and agency, their sense of ownership. Even at the youngest age, what can we do to support voice and choice for students? How do we support our educators' social emotional learning and their well-being? How do we deepen the partnerships that we have with our families and broaden our definition of what learning is, how it takes place, and as we're all seeing, we're broadening that definition of where learning takes place. In particular, I'm going to talk about elementary classroom teachers and physical education specialists who are all in transition, but who have a unique opportunity, I believe, in this time to reflect and innovate and to leverage instructional time that they might have with their students, whether it's synchronous and they're in some kind of face-to-face environment with their kids, or asynchronous, they're providing resources to students remotely and giving that student a set of clear expectations and direction on what they need to do to complete those assignments. We're going to talk a little bit about what that might look like in physical activity and physical education, while not forgetting that health education is part of all of this too, because health literacy is so critical right now in all of our students. So we're going to look at SEL in physical education, physical activity, and the content that's being used, and how these teachers who are required to teach this content in California, although the governor's executive order waived the required mandate for minutes of physical education instruction, did not waive the requirement for physical education instruction to be included in K-12 educational programming as a part of the core curriculum. So we will continue to see the need and be able to use physical education as a vehicle and as a tool for learning. Thinking about how to support teachers, I have been thinking and looking at what kind of social emotional learning infused supplemental physical activity and physical education digital content is available. Over the last 6 months, I've been involved in many projects across the state that have been looking at creating digital content that teachers can use to support their student learning. And I've seen teachers struggling. So very important that we understand that there are folks out there who have this content and that they're working together with organizations and schools to improve that content every day. But I think for school leaders like you, you can bring everyone together by helping provide some of this supplemental digital content. You can do it through using it for professional learning. You can provide tools and resources to your teachers and your principals so that they have something that they can support their teachers with. And all of this the goal is to create the supportive learning environment and to provide curriculum instruction that's going to be supportive and infused with social emotional learning, meaning it's recognizing and it's explicitly supporting those skills that students need and that's appropriate at the grade level that they're at. So thinking about supports for classroom and PE teachers, right now, many of them maybe in your own districts and communities are working to build this digital activity content. And and to be able to offer it in an online, a synchronous or asynchronous manner. Maybe they've got a blended approach that's going to be adopted in your particular district or school, and they're going to flip the classroom and provide some digital content for students to interact with, respond to, and maybe even use their own video as an assessment tool. So in these new environments, some of the things we want to think about is how can this idea of coming alongside a school or a teacher and their own development of content, curriculum, how can this help create some consistency and continuity? We know that that's super important during times of stress. Providing essential daily physical activity sessions that are so important for physical education and for the mental and physical health of our students. Our kids need to identify and express feelings, which is one of the skills that's embedded within that competency of self-awareness and self-management. We know that being able to do that helps them reduce stress and anxiety. Doing physical activity, being physically engaged in movement allows students to reconnect with their bodies. We know that one of the first things that happens in trauma is that students tend to disconnect from their body and they become less aware of and less energized when it comes to either wanting to move or really being able to move because they're not getting any support or encouragement in a way that allows them to, at the same time, express the feelings that they might have. So by integrating social emotional learning into this digital content, we're able to help support the learning of students and develop, again, the health that they need to maintain a healthy immune system, and then also to improve the cognitive function that kids need for academic learning. Finally, this kind of supplemental digital content can support all the adults in and around the school. Teachers have an easy to go to set of tools in a library that they can adapt to their particular needs, whether it's in a classroom setting as a classroom teacher or a physical educator who's got a tremendous number of students that they need to interact with on a regular basis. Parents need support too at home, and so recognizing the need for providing activities that are easy for parents to support and to translate into activity for their students and to be able to explain to students is very important also. So there's a connection then to parents and to family and parent engagement at the same time that you're using these resources to support students. If you have any questions, please make sure you put them into the chat, and I know Chris is going to be monitoring that for us. So let's look at it. Chris, was there a question?
No, I think you're good. I think there was someone in the back.
Okay, some general considerations to think about when it comes to social emotional learning, and this is prior to the exclusive online environment that we've been living in, or that we will be living in the near future. If you're not living in it already, it's really important that content be aligned to our physical education standards, and that the social emotional learning competencies and skills are also identified that are connected to the kinds of activities, learning activities that you're doing with your students. So these standards and competencies can be guides to identifying a natural alignment. So as I'm doing physical activity, I'm seeing what the connection is for me around self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, being able to communicate and have relations with others. Although I'm stuck at home, I can certainly practice those skills while I'm at home. Being explicit about what those competencies and skills are, super important to look for if you're using some supplemental curriculum. Calling out specifically what it is that you're doing with your students. Today we're working on empathy, and what does that mean? Walking in someone else's shoes. How does the fact that we're walking around the room, what does that make you think about when you're thinking of those in your own group, whether it's at home or you're in a school situation in the classroom with a reduced number of students? So super important to be explicit about that. We know that establishing routines is also super important for social emotional learning. Kids love routines, and I've taught at the elementary, middle, high school, and college level, and all the students I've had at all those levels love routines. Reinforcing social emotional learning skills by having a set of expectations and behaviors that you're looking for and you're reinforcing with your students every day, it can be so beneficial to helping them to see and to adopt those skills, to reinforce them in themselves until they're able to actually see and deliver on that promise of social emotional learning for themselves. So things like morning circles, instant activities and warm-ups, introductions that you use every day, closing activities that you might use every day, super valuable when it comes to helping to embed and to integrate social emotional learning. Finally, I think it's important that teachers and staff have to be able to model social emotional learning. All of the research that I've seen on social emotional learning tells us that you cannot teach what you don't know. Kids are constantly looking and learning by watching the adults around them. And so we must all become more proficient at those social emotional competencies and skills. Modeling them for our students is so critical in this new environment. A couple of resources to share with you. One of them comes from SHAPE, which is the Society for Health and Physical Educators. SHAPE America is the national organization that supports health and physical educators across the states. So they have some specific recommendations when it comes to the current reentry process. And I'm going to, in a second, when I come back, I'm going to go into the chat. I'm going to send you in the chat links to all these referenced resources that I have. So these are the specific content. We're going to take a quick look at these. This is something that I would share with teachers who are using and developing curriculum and content and delivering it to students. So I'm going to go through these rather quickly for you. And again, these are going to be available to you. So thinking about, you know, developing connections, how important is it that teachers connect? They got to make more of an effort when it comes to every student being connected and recognized in distance learning. Students need to feel that they're a part of the school community and that somebody cares about them. Kids cannot learn unless they have that connection to school. Those of us who have been in education for a while have seen this over and over again. Developing strategies that will connect with all of your students in your school, especially those that don't have online learning or if students are not able to meet online. How are you going to connect with your kids? Or if there's limited accessibility in the home to research, to resources or things like technology or even Wi-Fi. So how can we get to know each other and stay in touch with each other? And then finally, that part of that connection is creating lots of opportunities for kids to share and connect with one another throughout the school day. All of those things are so valuable. Teachers need to look at their curriculum. I would always tell teachers the first thing we need to do is just do an inventory of what you have. What lessons and activities are you already so good at that don't require equipment and that can be done in an individual and learning environment that could be repurposed for at-home work or for online use? What kind of lessons do you have in your current curriculum that can be adapted for students to use that maybe require some simple things like a rolled up ball of socks or a waste paper basket? Consider if your students can safely participate in those selected activities. Do they have space? Is there a need for an adult to assist them? Especially for our K2 kids, oftentimes adults need to be around to assist and to monitor. How will we share that information and get a great response from our kids in participation? Communicating expectations, probably one of the most important areas in this new environment. So being clear about what the expectations are for parents and guardians as well as for our students. Explaining, where do you find materials? How will you submit your work? What will you do if there's a problem? Internet goes down. I can't find an assignment. I lost it. My dog ate my laptop and I can't get to what you asked me to do. How will you be able to respond to that? So it's important to provide that kind of information to kids, to be able to explain, to be available through either office hours or some other readily and relatively easy to use communication device. Make sure the expectations are realistic for your students. So depending on the age and grade level that you're teaching at, what resources your students have in your community, consider the dynamics of the home. And think about equity, inclusion, okay, and accessibility for all of your kids. Recommunicating regularly to kids is really important, and to parents. We have so much going on in our lives. If you have kids in school, you know how difficult it is to stay in touch, and that you need to be reminded about what some of these important expectations are. So reach out to people who you don't hear from. You can't wait for them. You've got to reach out and engage. You got to be patient and understanding. Not all students are in the same situation. You don't know what's going on at home. So let's back up a little bit and think about, how can I be flexible in this situation? What can I do to help this student deal with the trauma and the anxiety that they're feeling right now, to help them move forward? Consistency is helpful. You know, what you do every day matters more than what you do once in a while. We love routine. Human beings love routine, kids in particular. So think about your regular daily classroom routines if you're a classroom teacher, or if you're a physical educator. What are the procedures and things that you could, what translates into the online environment? How can we help kids get that sense of familiarity? What teachers, you know, ask kids to do is really important. Can you participate in groups in an online environment? Well, Zoom allows you to do that. Google Classroom allows you to do that. Many of the tools and resources that are out there today, teachers can use to allow kids to connect with each other as part of learning sessions or remotely. What kind of special events and activities can still be done remotely? Can you have a field day, an at-home family day, family fitness night? Consider, finally, the kinds of visual reinforcement you can give kids of yourself. Kids need and want to hear from their teachers. They want to hear your voice, and they want to know that teachers are there and care for them. Finally, making content accessible for all learners, something, you know, we've been hearing a lot about universal design for learning for the last 2 years. All good teachers are already using universal design for learning and planning lessons. But consider that if it's not something that you're thinking about doing, or if your teachers are not doing it on a consistent basis. So thinking about kids' individual needs, giving voice and choice, making sure that students are allowed to have some flexibility in how they're responding to your teaching and the assessment that you're asking of your kids. Can we provide content that uses a variety of methods to ensure all kids can have access to it? Especially important if you have special education students in your classes, or students who are English language learners or long-term English language learners. Connect with those specialists on your campus who can help support you and help you translate what you're doing to make your content accessible for those students. And consider, again, that whole idea of universal design for learning and where you can go and get some of that. This resource you'll see listed, it's a crosswalk tool that lists all of the national physical education, health education content standards linked with the CASEL competencies. This is an example of what you would see from Sports for Learning. Some of the work I've done for them is to take lessons like this particular lesson here called Stress Busters and highlight it so that you can actually see what standards are being addressed in each component, and then how is it addressing social emotional learning. Great thing about health and physical education content standards is they are rich with a natural alignment for social emotional learning and the activities that are going to result in the ongoing learning that kids will have around social emotional learning. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley. I run operations for Sports for Learning. I don't have nearly as much experience as Chris Corliss, but I have been in the education industry for about 16 years now. And I've worked in early childhood education. I've worked with special education at the high school level, And I also worked at an international language school where we started a master's English health and fitness program. And then most recently, I work with grades K through 8, teaching social and emotional learning through physical activity with Sports for Learning. I am extremely passionate about education and physical education and just making a difference. And that's why Sports for Learning is a really great fit for me. And I'm really excited to share what we've been up to lately. Chris, would you mind just switching my slide for me, or making me the host if you can? Sorry, I can't hear you.
You mean if I'm muted, you can't hear me? Sorry.
That's okay.
Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can.
Either make me the host, or you can just slide for me. You can switch the slide.
Just changed it, Ashley, so you should be able to take over and share.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. Perfect. All right, perfect. So who we are at Sports for Learning, we provide on-site and distance learning support for educators. We really want to just support you all with this year's ever-changing climate. We realize that a lot of incredible stress and pressure has been put on everyone, and we really, that's always been our goal, to really support educators, and now more than ever, we really want to help in any way we can. Our mission is really to help kids learn and succeed through fun physical activities, and of course, help improve social and emotional well-being. We've served several students across California, and we're hoping to branch out of California and try to serve as many students as we possibly can. I'm really proud to say that we've actually helped improve attendance. Our students find our program usually so engaging that sometimes they want to come to school just because Sports for Learning is going to be there that day, which is really exciting for us. And then of course, I think everybody on this call knows that students are more receptive to learning when they're physically active. I know that just from being a mom, my kids are different kids after they're physically active. And so our curriculum is, of course, teaching social and emotional learning skills through physical activity. And how we do this is we actually create 6 lessons for each of CASEL's 5 competencies. And we understand that we can't have a one-size-fits-all curriculum. We need to really tailor it to the needs of specific grade levels. So we do have lessons for TK through 2nd grade, 3rd grade through 5th grade, as well as 6th grade through 8th grade. And we really try to focus on the whole student. We want to make sure that we're working on both their mental and physical well-being. And bonus for us is that our activities are aligned with the California Physical Education and Health Standards. So thank you, Chris, for pointing that out for us. And here you have all of those competencies that I know Chris has already gone over with you. And you'll see all of the different subcategories. So what we try to do is create a lesson for every single subcategory, and then of course make it age appropriate for students. I thought I would give you a couple examples of some of our lessons. So here we have a lesson called Smart Goals, and it's from the self-management competency, and the subcategory is goal setting. So this is actually a great one. We've actually piloted this one on children of all ages, and the older they are, of course, the more in depth you can go with this one. But we teach them what it means to set a SMART goal. And yes, we do teach them about specific, measurable, attainable, and time-based and relative. That is something we go over with them. Depending on the age range, maybe we don't go too in depth, but we do get them to set goals, and we play a fun game where we actually give them a goal, and we tell them in 30 seconds, we would like them to complete 25 jumping jacks. If they meet this goal, they get 1 point. If they exceed the goal, they get 2 points. They try this and then they get a chance to reevaluate that goal that we set for them. Was it attainable? Or was it not attainable? Was it too easy for them? And then we teach them to challenge themselves, or we teach them to modify so that it's a goal that they can actually achieve. And we teach them that you can set big goals, and as long as you work on this goal little by little, and you set little mini goals for yourself and you reach them, eventually you're going to meet that big goal. And that's how we teach them about goal setting with Sports for Learning. Another sample lesson is our Stress Busters lesson. So this is another self-management competency lesson, and the category is stress management. So how many of us have experienced stress lately, right? Lots of stress right now. So Stress Busters is a great way to teach children not only about managing stress and dealing with it, but how to come up with healthy coping skills when feeling stressed. And it's always interesting to hear what children say when you ask them about stress. I was actually with kindergartners recently, and they had an explanation for being stressed. And they told me it's when you're so angry that sometimes you don't even know what you're saying. And that was a 5-year-old who said that. I thought that was pretty great. And for the Stress Busters activity, what we do is we create a stress pool for students where they have to move from one end of the room to the other, and they're balancing a paper ball, or they can use a ball of socks, anything they have at home, and they're trying to transport that ball from one end of the room to the other using different movements. Anytime they drop that ball, they have to start over. Once they get to release that ball on the other side of the room, they take a big deep cleansing breath, they get to run as fast as they can to the other end of the room, and they start over until they get rid of 3 balls, and then the winner becomes the Stress Buster. So what's in every lesson? Every lesson starts with a sports themed warm-up. We want to engage our students right away, and we want to make sure that, of course, they're getting active right away. We also have our social and emotional learning lesson and discussion. We have our game, which is also another physical activity. And this is where we really take into consideration that learning lesson, that SEL competency and that subcategory. And we make sure that that game that we come up with, not only are the kids physically active, but we're teaching them all about that new SEL skill through the game. Reflection and evaluation, we always want to talk to them about what they just did, what it was demonstrated, what did they learn from the game. And then we have a growth mindset activity in every lesson as well. And the growth mindset activity is really just about personal growth, showing students of all ages that no matter what the task is, you can become better at it as long as you have a positive mindset and you work hard and you keep consistent and constantly practicing. And we always end with a social and emotional challenge of the day and a positive affirmation. So for example, in Stress Busters, our social and emotional learning challenge of the day is we encourage students the next time they're feeling stressed about something, they're feeling frustrated, they're feeling anxious, they're feeling angry, we encourage them to talk to somebody about it. We let them know that people really do want to help them, whether it's a parent or another household member, a teacher or a coach or a friend. And we let them know that everybody wants to help. It's important to know that you are worth helping. Tell yourself that. People do want to help me. So that's our SEL challenge and positive affirmation for Stress Busters. And in every lesson, we also include the 5 E's. So we always want to engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate every lesson that we have for every social and emotional learning skill. Here are just some examples that I thought I would share of our sport-themed warm-ups. What I think is worth mentioning here is that we really try, when we get our students to warm up using these sport-themed warm-ups, we warm them up as though they're going to play these sports. So for example, if they're doing the football warm-up, they're going to be working on endurance and agility, whereas if they're doing the tennis warm-up or the hockey warm-up, they're going to be working more on torque and rotation, which is kind of fun for the kids. Warm up like real athletes. And here are some examples of our growth mindset activities. So many of our games can become competitions, either amongst other students or between the instructor and the students. But the growth mindset activity is really meant to just be about personal growth. And so a great way to do this is to get the students to keep a personal journal. And this is really just for themselves. They do it together in the lesson, but it's just for themselves. So we have a balance challenge, push-ups. My favorite is the worm. I don't know if you guys know that cool dance move. I personally don't know how to do it, but I want to learn. And I just thought it would be so cool, for these students to learn how to do the worm. Thanks to Sports for Learning, they could be at prom someday doing the worm, thanks to us. Balancing act, juggling, plank challenge. Muscle memory is a fun one. Wall sit challenge, stretching, and meditation. So how do we deliver these lessons? We deliver them in several different ways. So we have our remote learning library model, which is our asynchronous learning, as well as our live virtual lessons, which is synchronous learning. And then we also offer a train the trainer program, as well as field lessons. Our remote learning library model allows students to receive 3 videos every week. And these videos are tailored to the specific grade range. They're on demand, so students can access them anytime. The TK through 2nd graders, they get to meet our heart rate superheroes, which is really exciting for TK through 2nd grade. I know when my kids see the heart rate heroes, they come running over. They can't wait to see them. Grades 3 through 8 will meet our inspirational coaches. They're maybe a little too young to appreciate the superheroes, so they get inspirational coaches. And they're greeted by the same coaches throughout, which I think is really important. I know Chris mentioned consistency a lot and having routines, and that's part of it. So they have the same routine every time they get these videos, and they're greeted with the same coaches throughout. So they really start to form a bond with these coaches, even though it isn't in a live setting. And again, this is 6 lessons for each social and emotional learning core competency. Our live virtual lessons, this is where you actually have a Sports for Learning coach deliver lessons to students. And these are scheduled ahead of time to support teachers and students in any way possible. Any time of day where, students and staff need extra support, you can schedule a Sports for Learning coach. We use the same competencies, 6 lessons for each. This allows students to actually meet with classmates on a regular basis. And again, it gives them human connection and consistency, but this time in a live setting. The train the trainer model is support for teachers. So this is where maybe you don't want a live lesson with a Sports for Learning instructor. Maybe you want to have our curriculum guide for yourselves and you want to implement our materials on your own. So we actually provide educators with our lessons, and this can be done, in a virtual setting, or you can even use it when you're back in the classroom. It's a 2-hour training that we provide you on how to implement our lessons. We also share best practices for virtual learning, because this is new for all of us. We teach delivery methods for each section of the lesson, so you can really make the most out of our core curriculum. And then we supply you with a curriculum guide with all of these lessons. And support, lots and lots of support. So we actually give you 3 hours of support after the 2-hour training. Field lessons, I know it's hard to imagine right now, but we're super fortunate. We were actually able to pilot our on-site program very recently, and it was a huge success. It's all with social distancing, so no equipment. Everybody's 10 feet apart from each other. We figure if we make it 10 feet apart, and kids get, scooching a little bit, we're still at least 6 feet apart. So we make everything 10 feet apart. So we develop SEL skills through physical activities with a coach. And coaches are typically college students. We want our students to have positive role models, and we follow the same curriculum, although some of our field lessons, of course, are different than they would be in a virtual setting or, of course, in our remote learning library. There's plenty of opportunity for teamwork, opportunity for competition, all in real life. And again, that human connection and consistency, that routine. Every lesson goes through all of those same steps that we went over before. So students really learn to know what to expect every time they see their Sports for Learning coach. So just this is a sort of like sneak peek at our train the trainer model. So just some delivery methods I'd like to share. For these sport theme warm-ups, you can turn these into games, which is great for younger students. So you can call out an exercise and then call it another exercise, and they switch from one exercise to the other as quickly as possible, sort of like a game of Simon Says. You can also have them freeze and hold different movements. You can also add challenges for older students, so time challenges. How many of this can you do in 30 seconds? You can add modifications to movements, show them how they can make movements more challenging. Competitions, see who can do the most. Who can do the most push-ups before falling over? Progress tracking is our growth mindset, of course, activities. This is lots of progress tracking, getting students to, track how well they did. And the important thing with the growth mindset activity that I like to mention is that we don't switch these every lesson. It's important to repeat the same growth mindset activity for at least a week at a time. That way the students really get to see their progress. And hopefully, by the end of the week, they see that, maybe they didn't master the worm the first or the second time they did it, but maybe by the third or fourth time, now they're doing the worm. And they bring that back to the classroom. The next time there's, a new math lesson that they don't quite understand, they tend to then maybe have a growth mindset in the future. And then, of course, goal setting for themselves. We want students to start to set goals for themselves, even at a young age. And we want them to feel safe to set realistic goals. That's why it's important that they keep these goals to themselves. It's not a competition. This is all about, meeting your own goals that you set for yourself. Some different delivery methods for actually going over these social and emotional learning skills. I know this was, tough for me. How do we talk about stress with a young child or even, a middle schooler? But what I've learned is, challenge students, ask them questions, never assume that they don't know the answer. A good way to start with this is an inquiry chart, just asking students what they know about a certain topic. Ask them what they want to know about a certain topic. Or you can use a T-graph. What does stress look like? What does stress sound like? And always revisit these at the end of the lesson. That way you can track progress. How much has the student actually learned from this lesson? And discussions are fantastic for social and emotional learning, especially as you get into the upper grade levels. But discussions can be very intimidating for students. They see all these faces staring at them, especially in a virtual setting, something they're not used to. So a great tip for this is to have breakout rooms for discussions. Maybe they're only meeting with 1 or 2 peers, and they're talking about some healthy coping skills that they use. And then you bring them back to the whole group setting, and then they get to share with everybody and they feel more comfortable. And the more often you have these discussions, the more confident they're going to be, and they're going to be more willing to share, which is great for social skills. Some game delivery methods, always demonstrate. That's what we tell our instructors. Demonstrate, encourage students, have fun, healthy competition. It's good for them. Team build. You can, for some of these games, it's so easy to put students into teams and have them team build. Read the room, look around, find those students who maybe seem lost or lonely or need that extra attention. Give them that attention they need. Ask them how they're doing. Sometimes even just asking them how they're doing means the world to them. And then know when to get help from students. So, if you have a student that isn't so engaged, get them to try to participate by maybe making them in charge of the game. That's always a good tip. And that's all for me. I'll turn it over to Chris.
Yeah, super. Thank you very much, Ashley. Yeah, very nice. And Chris as well. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. We ended up on time. We didn't practice this, but somehow we had 45, 50 slides and we ended up on time. So I hope that everybody really enjoyed this. Most important, we really hope that you got some takeaways that you can now practice, be it in design or be it implementation. If you are interested in partnering with us, we have different directors of district partnerships throughout the state. We have 5 in different areas. So we will get them to follow up with you. And what we typically do is we set up a short 20-minute call and we go through these models, which you're now pretty familiar with. So it'll be an expedited call to see if you might be interested in partnering with us. If you do have any specific questions, that's my email address, that's my cell phone. I'm available till 10 p.m. every night. Joke. But yeah, so feel free to reach out. And again, thanks very much, Corey, also for setting this up. There was no questions in the chat, so hopefully we answered all your questions that might have popped up. Corey, I'll pass it back over to you, and thank you very much again.
Well, thank you all, Chris, and Ashley, for a great presentation, and thank you all for attending today's presentation. I will be sending out a copy of this recording once it's uploaded on YouTube, so feel free to share it with your colleagues. And I will also be sending in an email the resources that Chris had placed in the chat as well, in case you missed copying and pasting those. Thank you all again very much, and we look forward to seeing you at a future webinar. Have a great day, everyone.